Hi, everybody. Welcome to Humanae Vitae Online. I can't believe we're already in week 3. My name is Katie Smith, and I'm the Executive Director. Thanks so much for watching our recording. Just a quick note, our actual Humanae Vitae's actual anniversary is this Saturday. It's on the 25th. It'll be 52 years. So make sure to celebrate with your friends and family, and make sure to say a prayer for all of those who are working in defense of life from conception to natural death, and for all of those who struggle every day with making decisions that are pro-life. We can't wait to get started, and we'll see you all soon. Almost to the top of the hour here. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Well, we have a very exciting anniversary coming up on the 25th. It's the 52nd anniversary of Humanae Vitae, of the actual publication date. And so I was going to ask, just as people come into the room, ask our panelists if they're doing anything special to celebrate.
Oh gosh. We're doing this to celebrate.
I like it, Leah. I can endorse that.
Yeah, my first thought was this too. But definitely some extra prayers. So, yeah.
We have a month-long, we have a group that's getting text messages every day and saying our CCL prayer. We have another group that's getting email messages every day and saying our CCL prayer. So we have a whole month of novena for this. And we just issued a cute little video. And we're doing this. And so it's a lot of fun. We have a lot of stuff going on. We're doing one of our teaching couple is amazing. She's going to do a rosary at the Holy Spirit Center, and she's going to Facebook Live it for our entire group, so we can all join in prayer together in celebration of Humanae Vitae.
Wow. If anyone hasn't been to the Holy Spirit Center in Cincinnati, I highly recommend it. I don't know what the COVID restrictions are on it, but it's beautiful. The church there is gorgeous. Mm-hmm. Catherine, anything exciting? I think you're on mute, sorry.
No, not really. Just enjoying listening to all of you. That's pretty much it.
I know at Endow we're going to do something special for one of our studies, for our Humanae Vitae studies. So definitely be on the lookout for that. And then personally, I don't know, we haven't thought about it, definitely prayers, but yeah, enjoying that so I'm 9 weeks away from my due date, and I guess enjoying that this little guy hasn't made his way into the world quite yet.
Absolutely, that's something to be grateful for.
Yeah, despite everything, he's hanging on, so we'll just keep praying for that.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, Deacon Luke, for those of you who've joined us in the past and noticed our masculine genius, Deacon Luke, is missing. He's been filming a video, so he'll be jumping in just as soon as he can get on his computer. So I'll go ahead and open us up in prayer. And I know we have quite a few new signups, so I'm going to have everybody introduce themselves really quick after we pray, and then we'll get started. All right. And I'm actually going to open with our prayer again, just because I think it's so important to have this prayer in our arsenal of memorized prayers, especially for after communion, with our opening prayer. If you have the Endow study, it's on page 37, so you can follow along. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Soul of Christ, sanctify me. Body of Christ, save me. Blood of Christ, inebriate me. Water from Christ's side, wash me. Passion of Christ, strengthen me. O good Jesus, hear me. Within thy wounds hide me. Suffer me not to be separated from you. From the malicious enemy defend me. In the hour of my death call me, and bid me come unto you, that I may praise you with your saints and with your angels, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. All right, Sister Virgin Mary, I'll have you go first, and then we'll kind of go around in a circle.
Okay. So For me, what really stood out in
Sorry, introduce yourself real quick.
Oh, right.
Sorry.
My name is Sister Bridget Mary. I am a first-year law student at Villanova in Philadelphia. I just finished my first year, starting my second coming up very soon. And I have an interest in health law. And yeah, just really grateful to be part of this program and dive more deeply in the spirituality of our beautiful Holy Father, Pope Paul VI, and his paternal care over us still to this day. So I'm just grateful for that. So.
My name is Katie Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Endow, and very happy to be here with all of you. Catherine?
My name is Catherine Smith, and I am a second year now graduate student at the Augustine Institute studying Leadership for the New Evangelization, which is basically theological formation focused on pastoral care in the church, and I work part-time for Endow.
And Leah?
My name is Leah Jacobson. I'm in central Minnesota. I'm a mom to 7 kids. One of them just came in and said hello. But in my not mothering and wife time, I'm also the CEO and the founder of the Guiding Star Project, and we work on helping to define a norm for women's health care that's natural and restorative and makes people whole.
And Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Zelenis. I'm the Executive Director of Couple to Couple League International, and we actually are going to be celebrating our 50th year coming up. And it was a ministry that started in 1971, inspired by Humanae Vitae.
Awesome. That's so cool how close you guys are. Like the encyclical came out and then boom, you guys found it. Like not much time in between. It's pretty amazing. Well, for those of you who have been reading along, we're in chapter 3 in the Endow study, which is the encyclical paragraphs 10 through, to get my sticky notes in the right place here, 10 through 13. So I'm going to have Catherine, she'll be continuing to answer your questions in the background, and then we'll open it up again at the half-hour mark for anybody who raises their hand. But I'm going to ask our panelists kind of what stood out to you from those particular paragraphs, both from a professional and a personal standpoint. So sister, you can go ahead now.
So for me, what stood out to me, I guess, professionally, was the paragraph from this it follows. So right, it's the last one of 10, that we are not free to act as we choose in the service of transmitting life. And particularly for parents, but as if it were wholly up to them to decide what is the right course to follow. And really just myself reflecting on that, there's, as a religious Sister of Mercy of Alma, Michigan, we take 4 vows, but of particular 3 vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. And I think obedience is really bucked in the world today. And so, but really that's the Christian message. Jesus said, my food is to do the will of God. And that's our sustenance, is to do his will. And how often we really are struggling to discern and to determine what his will is. And that canon law says actually that the religious have a right to the gift of obedience. And that, like, if we were to lose our superiors, if we were to lose that we actually would have like a case before a tribunal to say that our right has been removed from us. And so to really see obedience not as an obligation that's imposed on us, but a right to true happiness, to us finding our way of who we're called to be in God, and the plans that he has in mind for us. And so to like capitalize on those opportunities when we really know the will of God. So for me, it's different as a religious, but for men and women, married couples, like you have these sentinel events in your life of, should I quit? Should I do this? Like as a father, me quitting and leaving this job and starting a new business, like when I just have a new baby boy, or, and all these different things that family members have to go through, and in particular, husband and wife have to grapple with in their life of, is this the Lord's will? Well, one thing that you have for sure is the Lord's will is the procreative and unitive act in the marital act, and to magnify his will there, and to let that breathe and live in your life and be a devotion in your life, really, so that can illuminate your other decisions of where maybe his will might not be so clear. And it's the same for me. Like I have my horarium, or I have different things where I know what the will of God is for me in the day. And so I try to do that to the best of my ability. So when the other things come up, I can look at those in light of what I do know is his will. If I don't have an immediate answer from a superior or something, and I can know, okay, well, this is how I should respond now. So for me professionally, that's really what stood out there.
Awesome, thank you. Deacon Luke just joined us. We introduced ourselves real quick, so I'll have you do the quick, we have new people joining us, so just the quick introduction, Deacon Luke.
Beautiful. Hello, everyone. My name is Deacon Luke Doyle. I'm a transitional deacon of the Archdiocese of Kansas City in Kansas. Transitional means that I am ordained a deacon. I am a deacon, but I will only be a deacon for about a year. So I was ordained on May 16th this year, and please God will be ordained a Catholic priest of the Archdiocese of KCK on May 29th next year. Student at Kenrick Lennon Seminary in St. Louis, Missouri, studying biomedical ethics for the Archdiocese through a program at the University of Mary in the National Catholic Bioethics Center. Happy to be with everybody.
All right, so Leah, Katie, and Deacon Luke, from this particular chapter and these particular paragraphs, what did you find most striking, either personally or professionally?
I'd like to follow up with what Sister was saying. Like what hit me was that it was talking about, doing an objective good, and that, you have to choose that. And I think it's a little bit, I think it's, in my mind, I feel like it's a little bit backwards in 2020 than it was in, 1968 when this was written. And I feel like at that time, maybe you would look at it as obedience, and there would be a little bit different view. Whereas now I feel people come at it like science is here, and I know, I can choose to do, control birth, and I can control this. Literally, I mean, people feel empowered, and they feel like science is on their side, and it's so easy, right? It's pushed by everybody. But instead, if they make literally a free choice of will to follow this, to choose, to choose national family planning, to choose this, to follow this, it allows room for the Holy Spirit to then teach them, and for them to become obedient to the whole message. So I don't know, it's a nuance, but for me, I feel like it's in a little different place than we were in 71, where it might have been more like, more maybe, or 68 rather, that would have been more understandable, that people would understand they're getting married and it's obedience, and, your will is, it's God's will and so forth. And now I feel like they need to make a discrete action, but by choosing the good, just like if you chose the bad, it could never turn out right. If you choose the good, it lets all this graces flow from it, and it comes back and teaches you the meaning of what this says with the objective good. So anyway, it's a nuance, but it's something that I was thinking about when we were looking at it.
To add to that, I think we forget what a gift it is that God allows us to choose the good. Like, God loves us so much, he gives us free will, and we can choose for him, which is just so profound and powerful if you stop and think about it. Like, we get that choice. He loves us enough and trust us, only he knows why, and knows that we have that capacity to choose for him, to choose the good. Deacon Luke and Leah?
Sure. To go off of kind of what Katie was talking about, I think in our culture today, there very much is a spirit of refusal to submit. And it's almost this mindset of, when I submit, I lose my freedom, because I have to I bow to the tyranny of some other leader or what have you. And so, it's almost like this American and this modern thought of if you refuse to submit, that's the path to happiness. But I think we get a lot of that wrong. The mindset, this notion of, I'm not going to submit to anyone or anything, that's kind of actually the enemy's mindset in his approach to God, is I won't do that. I'm not going to submit to you, whatever. And so I think we're a sign of actual growth in the spiritual life and in the intellectual life as well, is when we are able to see the gospel and to see the teachings of the church as presenting and offering the fullness of what is true. And I think it's a tremendous sign of growth and maturation in the spiritual life when I'm not going to submit, or because the church says so, when that is the reason for doing something, for choosing to accept something, or to bow to something. That actually is a tremendous sign of intellectual maturity and of wisdom, to be able to acknowledge this is the bride of Jesus. She possesses within herself the fullness of the truth. Christ has given these leaders the authority to teach, govern, and sanctify in his name. And so by accepting that authority and by bowing to it, by honoring it, I think that's a tremendous sign of growth in faith, as well as in wisdom. And that's the opposite of what we're invited to as a culture. So kind of this notion of refusing to submit so that I can decide for myself, versus acknowledging, actually, this institution was created by God to tell me who I am and how I ought to live. And it gets me right. And so I choose to submit to that.
Beautiful. Leah?
Yeah, no, there was so many things that were jumping out in this section. First thing probably two things, I'll focus on two. First one is the line in paragraph 11 where it calls the sexual act noble and worthy. Something about that just was like, yes, see, the church doesn't hate sex. Because I think sometimes younger generation sometimes believes that because there are these rules or these like guidelines that are put in place to protect the marital act and to protect its dignity, there's this misinterpretation that in some way we think that it's bad or not a good and beautiful thing in and of itself. And so, that understanding of the church loves the marital act so much that it wants to protect it within its right place. It wants to bring out the beauty of it, the fullness of it. That this is something that when used properly is for our sanctification. It's for the goodness and the beauty of the world. And the way that the world has treated sex has caused so much wounding and so much brokenness. And just to see the act as noble and worthy, that really jumped out at me. Like, yes, like, let's just say that over and over again. The church thinks this is noble and worthy. So that jumped out at me. And then the other piece that really jumped out at me is where it talks about, the nature of the act, that it is both procreative and unitive. And so for me as a married woman who we've practiced NFP throughout our entire marriage, I think sometimes it becomes very easy for us to focus just on the procreative aspect of it, especially if you are trying to get pregnant or if you are trying to avoid a pregnancy. And we can neglect the unitive aspect of the marital act. For women who have had a lot of consecutive pregnancies or a lot of babies, like it sometimes starts to feel like a drag, or it feels like a burden, or it feels like something that you can actually fear. You can actually have a lot of anxiety about, oh my gosh, like, can I be open to life right now? I just can't, And so I think it's really beautiful where it talks about men observing the conjugal act imposed on one's partner without regard to their condition. That's just a really beautiful aspect of this too, that, this act is not a unitive act if there's so much anxiety and fear over the procreative aspect of it. And you have to keep both of those in balance at all times, and recognizing that, the partner's mental health, physical health, all of that really matters. So there was so much in here. I don't even know. I'm just like throwing all the things that were jumping out at me. I have like so many things underlined, but those are the things that jumped out at me as a mother.
Yeah, I had similar to you in talking about like the church upholds sex and marriage is good. Like, this is a good thing. I did my thesis on the hookup culture at Catholic universities, and it focused on sex as almost like, when you look at the hookup culture and when you look at sexual assault, it's like something to get out of the way. Like, your virginity is something to lose, to get out of the way so that you're a part of this culture. And it's so fascinating that the people who are in the culture, I'll reference this, but there's a woman named Donna Fritas who did a ton of research on the hookup culture, but nobody wants to participate in it. Like, when she would do one-on-one interviews, everyone could agree that this was wrong and this was the wrong place for sex to be, and that they would have rather waited till marriage, and that the was awful. They hated it, but they didn't know how to like choose the objective good and how to get out. And so for me, just like hearing that again of like, yes, the church sees this as good and realizes that like the reason why you're suffering so much is because you chose not for the good. So
there's just an incredible woundedness, I think, especially among, I mean, I see it a lot among women that, they don't understand the goodness and the beauty of their bodies, and this culture has placed some really horrible expectations upon women, you know, that in terms of how sex is supposed to be part of their life. A lot of lies.
Yeah.
We were sharing about like St. Francis saying that it's not just a hospital that the church is, but we're all in intensive care right now because, as Leah says, this is such a hard issue, right? Because it affects you, all those people in your study, Katie, you know, like it's not just a thing, right? It's their body, it's their mind, it's their soul. You know, it ties you to an eternal creation, a system of eternal creation. That's awesome and scary when you're on the wrong side of it. This in paragraph 13, it says, one is not a master of the sources of life. That's true, right? But rather a minister of the design. So if we're ministers of the design, you know, that places on us some need to do what we're doing, understand it, and also act properly to foster it. And then, but also to you know, share that with others and help and support them, be compassionate to all the other people in intensive care with us, because, you know, we got to reach out and give them a hand with all these things, because it's such a wounded society, because the devil's really got into this thing, which is core. It's a creative power and got right in the middle there and makes it terrible for people that aren't formed correctly, our brothers and sisters.
I think I'd be remiss. It's a hard topic to bring up, but even just looking at how Humanae Vitae came to be, and then the response that came from it. Our culture is wounded and confused, but so is our church and the Church of Christ. And the response of the clergy to Humanae Vitae, the response of religious to Humanae Vitae was varied. And for the lay faithful, it was and remains confusing, and trying to parse out, okay, what is the truth? When I'm hearing from my pastor one thing, or I'm witnessing from a religious these behaviors, what is truth? Because these are ideal models for union with God, and so. First, I think just as a representative of religious, I want to apologize. But second, I want to say that kind of going off of what Katie just said in terms of ministers of the design, that there is still that ideal. And just because humans don't live up to that ideal doesn't mean that that's not there, and doesn't mean that that call has left. And so in the midst of that confusion, to not lose hope, even in to still remain praying for the ones who have fallen from that ideal, because God saw something in them to call them to that. And that vocation was a real call from the Lord at some point, that caused them to take one step, even something. There was something there, some spark that was known only to God. But that said, that on a particular level, on the universal level, to not lose hope in these vocations that the Lord has instilled as a gift to all the faithful to look to and to follow, as a sure sign of this is how to achieve union with God. But I guess then just to kind of go off of that, then how do we go from here? Like, how do you know as lay faithful, when you're hearing one thing, what's true? And I think the great gift we have in the electronic age is there's a new responsibility for everyone to really enter into their baptismal graces of priest, prophet, and king, and to own their faith. And so to do the research, Google it, look up Humanae Vitae. If there's things that don't sit right with you, pursue the encyclicals, and get to know the Vatican webpage of all the different encyclicals that the Holy Fathers have issued, and really dive into your faith. And And then you can have that compassion and empathy when someone might have misguided compassion, even when they're an authority figure. But I just really encourage you to be the carrier of these graces that the Lord has instilled in you. And in particular, you are ministers of the sacrament of holy matrimony, not the church. Like, this has been a gift entrusted to you that the church needs for you to give back. So to really dive into what the church sees as holy matrimony, because you are those ministers, and we are in need of you to minister that to us, just as we need holy priests and holy religious to minister the other things. So
as Katie had brought up a point, and now I forget what it was, but it brought me to, and sister with you as well, when they did the study on the hookup culture and looked at, all this woundedness and this brokenness, and we're in this ICU with all of these wounded young adults. What are we going to do? The solution, which I actually think was brilliant, that the person came up with, was not like, let's immediately bring them into the fullness of the truth of the church, because they're not going to be able to handle it at that point. Like, they're so far removed from this formation that, I think it's St. Paul who says, like, give them milk first and then they can chew on meat. And so her objective was to actually teach them how to date, because nobody had taught anybody how to date. And so she's like, this is how you honor the dignity of the human being. You take them to coffee, you look them in the eye, you ask them questions. And I found the whole thing fascinating of, like, this is how we start to bring people back, right? We can't get them to jump over the huge hurdle of, like, you are hooking up with a different person every night, to now all of a sudden, those conversions are kind of once in a lifetime of someone making that radical of a change. But, like, how can we step through those steps of formation to get you and all of us really on the right track?
And I would just add to what you're saying, that one of the things that we're pondering, and I invite everyone and all our audience to, is the 5th anniversary of Laudate Si, and the powerful message of creation care that resonates so much with young and old, but maybe young are hearing in themselves the need to take care of creation, and they get that at a very deep level. And this Humanae Vitae speaks to that. It speaks to the natural law and the dignity. And so those messages are very together. So as Katie's saying, we want to feed them with milk. So sometimes the milk is, we start talking about creation care and how we take good care of creation, because eventually you'll get to, oh, by the way, and you're part of creation, and as are you in person, and how do you do that? So just to share with you, that's something we're puzzling over, on how to, really say those words well, and speak, speak with the heart to everyone else that we're working with.
It's beautiful.
If I can I want to jump back a little bit. Katie, what you were saying, I just think that's such a fascinating thing, like teaching college students how to date, teaching young people how to date. And as a former campus minister, I would agree with you. There are definitely some steps that have been missed in that formation of just the basics of courtship and the basics of recognizing the dignity of another. I think the other piece to this is, we have to remember the dignity of the other, but also then the dignity of the self. Because so many are willing to engage in this hookup culture because they really don't have an understanding of their own dignity and their own worth. And so instilling that as well, teaching our children proper boundaries, and, you deserve to be treated well. You deserve to have, a unitive aspect to your relationships where you have a bonding with another person that's beyond a physical bonding. So those two pieces, like, yes, they have to see the other and look the other in the eye and see their value, but then in the mirror, they have to see their own value as well, that I deserve to be treated well. And that's really missing. There's been a huge lack of boundaries for our children, just in terms of their own dignity.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, that was one of the elements that was brought up in the study, is that the people just felt worthless. Like, the rates of depression and anxiety were pretty huge. So it's there.
Two brief comments, if you let me. One, sister, thanks so much for your comments. They really touched my heart in a particular way as a future priest and person who will be responsible for dispensing the sacred mysteries of Christ. My job is absolutely not, it isn't, and it's not going to be really to come up with anything new. In the year 2020, stewards of the sacred mysteries of the Eucharist, of the gospel of life, of all these things. The call of the church is not to freestyle a new theology or a new mindset or philosophy. It's to know what makes saints, which has been witnessed for 2,000 years, and to continue to proclaim that boldly in a way that the culture can see it and respond to it. And I think it's important probably to hold up that yes, the church in many ways did not deliver the true Humanae Vitae, and that's important to be aware of. That we do have priests, bishops, religious sisters in the church who perhaps still are not faithful to teaching and to ministering in a way that is consistent with Humanae Vitae. So to be aware of that and to recognize it on one hand, but then to also, on the other hand, not live in fear of the church and not live in a spirit of doubt or distrust, but to acknowledge that in kind of a crazy way, there actually is precedent for this. I think Humanae Vitae is very, in some ways, in a very similar vein from the story of the Old Testament of Joshua and Caleb. If you know, the story is the people of Israel arrive at the promised land and they're going to go in and reconnoiter the promised land and try to get a sense of like the lay of the land, how do things work and whatnot. They send in 12 spies to discern kind of this and to come up with a report and go back to the leader and say, here's how things look. And in this report of the 12 spies, 10 of them are like, this is impossible. There's no way that we can do this. Our people are not going to be on board for this. Like, really, like, we can't do this, period. Like, let's move on and try and figure out something else. And Joshua and Caleb are the ones who basically send a message of, no, with the Lord, anything is possible. And we lose ourselves when we forget that essential truth that he is God, we are not. And with him, we can do anything. Like, let's go for it. And I think that that's actually kind of historical precedent for Humanae Vitae, for this message that when the Holy Father asked for these different commissions to give him kind of the lay of the land and this sense of where things at and how are the people doing, that voice that says, there's no hope, there's no way that we can do this, it's way too hard, whatever, there's not a whole lot of radical trust in the Lord, and that movement of the heart to bet everything on him. And so I think that's something that has to be named and has to be held up as well, that in every moment of our lives as Christians, we're called to live the truth that Jesus is trustworthy, that he is God, that we are not. And that when we move in conjunction with him and we choose to give the big stuff to him, that it makes literally anything possible. And I think that's a segue into just like naming and acknowledging the great saint that the church celebrates today as well, St. Mary Magdalene, who, to speak of the woundedness present in our culture today and how many people are suffering and in need of healing. She's a great saint and reminder that this is absolutely possible. And that when we give our woundedness, when we give our sufferings and the stupidity present in our lives, we're willing to give those things to the Lord, it actually gives him a lot to work with. That his grace is most powerfully manifested when it's allowed to touch our wounds. And so just to hold that up as well, that there's precedent in the church for Jesus to heal, for him to heal even what we might say are the worst of sinners or the most hardened of hearts, to win even those for his people.
Yeah, that's so true. Great connection to St. Mary Magdalene. Good, very providential that we're talking about this on her feast day.
Yeah.
We've reached the halfway point, so if anyone wants to raise their hand and jump in, ask any of our panelists questions, or make a comment, you're more than welcome. Okay, we've already got somebody. That went quick. Hey, Daryl and Aisha, how are you?
Hi, can you hear us?
We can.
Great. I was a bit confused with the mute unmute button on the screen. Sorry. So yeah. So I think one quick thought and a question again. So I think largely this is, I think, a really profound and touching part of the encyclical, and it easily touches those of us who are quite grounded in it. So sometimes I see it as, if you're convinced with Humanae Vitae, this is, further reinforcement or further, sort of strengthening your view and thought. But we often minister to couples who don't necessarily have that kind of grounding, especially in the faith. So, and then it's sometimes a bit difficult because, like you rightly said, or I think someone rightly said, it's they're looking for, how can we enjoy this? So how can we, get something out of this from our end? So not from a selfish perspective, but also to probably convince themselves that they're not being pushed down a path, to justify something, or from a defensive standpoint. I don't know whether I'm communicating myself clearly, but I think that's a bit of a struggle sometimes.
We are killjoys, to be honest.
So you don't want to be a killjoy. Yeah, that's the right term. Thanks, Aisha. So I think sometimes, yeah, and we sound like that, especially with engaged couples who I think in their hearts really want to be part of this, but are still not fully convinced. So you look at their face and the body language and you see, oh, I haven't really got through to them, and you really want to. So what's your advice on how to encounter? I'm sure you've seen some of this yourself.
Great.
Katie, I don't, if I could call you out, because earlier on you were talking kind of similar right down this line about having compassion for those, who might not see yet. But maybe if you could speak a little bit more into that, because I was really struck by what you said.
Well, thanks, sister. I hope I do a good job answering, but I guess this is the couple league works with this every day. And that is our goal, to try to be compassionate, to try to help people recognize that this is a very confusing world, and you're being given so many mixed messages. So one of the things that we try to do is we definitely, we just tell, well, first of all, we tell the objective truth and we tell our witness, because at the end of the day that stands. And like Deacon Luke was pointing at, like, you have to get that right. So just teaching the class and doing that is great. But the other thing is we have compassion, and we try to speak to them about their understanding. And very often we come at it from health. Very often, the most common thing, pardon me, that I've run into is women will say to me, well, I can't do this because I'm different. My cycle's different. I'm different. And, there's a real issue there, because if that's truly true, first of all, you need to know more about that. You're probably not that weird, and you probably don't understand what's going on. But the other part is that if there is something weird, you probably should get it taken care of. You should probably have some help, some nutritional strategy, or you should see a doctor or something like that. So I know that might sound very simplistic, but I mean, I guess I'm trying to answer the question that that's very often the place that we connect with people. That's very often the place that we can speak to them, is personally about their health and their cycle. And when we show that willingness to enter into their doubts and their fears and their conviction that they're weird and something's wrong and so forth, then it empowers them. Just like telling them how we were laughing about, like, but you get a temperature spike and no one knows that. And so for some people, that's a huge awakening to God's design. When they see that spike every month, they're like, wow, you're kidding me. Like, cause that combines the scientific, right, with, with the spiritual, right? Because you're demonstrating God's design. So.
Okay, thanks, Katie.
Can I speak to this one for just a second? The killjoy, that you don't killjoy. In my time in campus ministry, I found that a lot of students wanted to know very particulars, like, is this act okay? And they had very specific acts in mind, and they were very legalistic. It was a very, this is okay, this is the line, this is not okay. And so we had a lot of conversations and discussions about that, because a lot of their preconceived notions about what is enjoyable in the sexual act had come from, honestly, a very broken and pornographic background. So we talked a lot about redefining what is joyful sex, what is good sex. And when we really broke it down, it was, looking into your partner's eyes and knowing that you have respected them fully, their personhood, their dignity, that you have treated them, as a beautiful creation of God. And when they started to kind of back off and recognize that maybe what they were thinking was good sex or good enjoyable sex was, they realized it really wasn't. You know, it was a physical exertion of pleasure and it was a momentary thing, but in the end it actually damaged their relationship in the long term, and they began to understand that that's actually not what I desire. I don't desire to treat my beloved in that way in the long term. And so a lot of discussions about just preconceived notions about what is, you know, good sex.
Thanks, Leah. I also liked, when you earlier said about how we, they need to also look at themselves individually. I think very often what happens, you're looking at your partner and saying, okay, whatever, but we don't look in the mirror. That was something which I really like, because that's something which we can take to them. It's actually what we do in EE, know yourself first before you know your partner, and then, know God, so yes, thanks for that. That was really what really resonated with me.
Thanks, Katie, as well. I think the nutrition part completely resonates with us. That's a line we always use in our NFP teaching as well with CCL, and familiar with that. So thanks, everyone. I think that gives us a sense of confidence as well, and something to take away.
Great. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, here. Okay, Valerie is up next. Hi, Valerie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Uh-oh. Can you?
My internet connection isn't great, so let me know if I cut off. I really like this chapter. I found the thing that I think probably would be most challenging to my friends when I talk about it with them is the idea that our body isn't ours. It isn't our property. And I really like the way that it talks about how, well, our body isn't property. Like it's nobody's property. It's not a thing to own. But it is the one that, in conversations with kind of women my age, kind of in their late 20s, early 30s, that's a really hard cultural idea to shift. How have any of you had those conversations, and how would you suggest kind of trying to get around it?
It's an awesome question, Valerie. I have a feeling Leah might have a
I've had that conversation so many times. I have that conversation a lot, actually. The one thing I didn't mention about my background is I'm actually a board certified lactation consultant as well. So I work with women in the breastfeeding process, shortly after birth. And this idea comes up over and over again that my body was not made for me. My body was meant to be in communion and relationship with others. And that comes up a lot in just the surrender to pregnancy and fertility, and specifically in breastfeeding as well. Yeah. It's a huge surrender. Yeah. And I think culturally, the women's movement and feminism has, my body, my choice. That's been the mantra for 50 years. And it's a lie in many ways. Like, yes, we are given our body as we steward it. It's a gift to us. But our body is never meant to be in isolation. It is always meant to be in relationship with other. Actually, I saw the quote from John Paul II in the study guide, and I underlined it again because I just love this quote. And it says, "Man becomes an image of God, not so much in the moment of solitude, but in the moment of communion." And just understanding that on our own, isolated, just as a woman, we're never going to fully image God's intention for us as a human creature. And so recognizing that if we have this, strict individualism, we're never going to reach the full capacity of what we were created to be. So I don't know if you can, but that's a common conversation I have.
Yeah, I bet, because it's interesting when you talk about breastfeeding. I'm a mum of one, and I'm pregnant with another baby. It's due in January, which is exciting. But I couldn't breastfeed my first baby due to complications kind of after pregnancy. And there were a variety of reactions, most of which were sympathetic, but a couple of them were like, yeah, you've no idea how lucky you are. I hated breastfeeding because my body wasn't my own. And I desperately wanted to breastfeed. And I found it really, really sad that was people's kind of reaction to it.
It's not an uncommon sentiment. A lot of women really feel like this is mine. And they, sometimes a baby or another or a spouse or whatever is an infringement upon my personal autonomy, which is the exact opposite of how we were created to be. Our physical body gives us hints at the spiritual truth that, you know, our womb is meant to receive and nourish, our breasts are meant to nourish. Like, God gave us very physical indications of what our spiritual, you know, role is.
Yeah, and I think that's something we don't talk about enough in church, I guess. You know, I suppose it's not comfortable coming from a priest from the pulpit, but it's not something we talk about in church. I'd never encountered any of this till after I was married, and I wish I had before. So yeah, I'm really keen to talk about with other young women. But that seems to be the sticking point for lots of them. They're like, they just can't get over the "it's my body" bit. So yeah, no, thank you. That's good advice.
Just to tag on with that really quickly, but first, I mean, kind of going off the lactation, the beauty, I mean, I'm just so struck by the woman's body that if the baby is sick, the mother actually produces antibodies for the baby in the breastfeeding. And if the baby's malnourished, the mother's body compensates for that. And so there are different, like, how the mother's body, when the baby is separated, even, I mean, it's just like God's mystery and the genius of woman, that he has created this. Even kind of going off of union and procreation, like, and looking at lactation and breastfeeding as just an example of that it's not this constant, like, ABC, 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 this is the method, this is how it's always done, but that actually, like, the woman's body listens to the baby and what's going on with the baby's body, and then the woman's body responds, and then the baby's body, like, responds by improving. And just, like, even in breastfeeding, to see that symbiotic dialogue going on just through the bodies is, I mean, I'm just in awe of it. It's really something to marvel at. But for me, I kind of was coming from that, you know, like, it's especially the generation that I am without even knowing how much individualism was ingrained into me. And so for me, returning back to the church after my reversion and, like, really grappling with, like, well, why, like, how do I know for sure that that I am not my own, and what does it mean to be the Lord's, and what are all these things going, and to really just kind of sit with the reality of it, because honestly, it's not a reality to say that we're owners of our bodies. We don't even know our bodies. I can't, for me to realize when I first was grappling with that question, that my mom knew me better than I knew myself, because there are memories that I had from 3, 2, 1 that I don't have, but my mom has. And there are memories that my mom doesn't even know of me from when I was in her womb, that, like, when I behaved certain ways and she wasn't aware of it, or something that someone else must know. And someone else must see and hold and be keeper of those memories. And for me, that was a real entry into me knowing that for all of eternity, I am the Lord's, that I didn't will myself into being. I didn't say I should have 5 fingers. I didn't say how things should be. I had no say in that. And that he is the designer and author of my body. And then even really looking at, you know, the Israelites, when they say with Jesus, his blood be on us and on our children. And in a way, they're saying it as a condemnation to themselves. But the reality is his blood has been poured on us. And we have been bought at a steep price. And so as much as possible, really entering into, whenever friends might not really want to give up that ownership of the body, to bring in, at least to start bringing in the love of Jesus, and to start parsing out that reality, because ultimately what it's rooted in is a lack of trust that they have been held by the gaze of God for all of eternity, and adored by him. And so to really dive into that wound of, do you know that you are loved? Do you know that you're a unique, unrepeatable mystery that will never be recreated? And to just kind of start asking those questions for them to take home with them in prayer. Yeah,
that's really beautiful. Thank you.
Valerie, can I make a brief comment? Your question touched the heart of a celibate man. I think it saddens me to hear your comment that perhaps the church and the men that run her and serve her don't speak of this, because it's the exact same truth for a celibate man as it would be for anyone else, that we are called to self-gift. And so John Paul II offers to us what he called the law of the gift, that life becomes beautiful, meanwhile, authentically, that which it was made to be, to the extent that it is given away as a gift and love to God and to other people. And so I think at the core, I mean, that statement, it's either true or it's not. It can't be like both true and also not true. And so our culture tells us that happiness is found through self-worship, through doing what you want, how you want, with whoever you want, holding on to your stuff and to your body, seeking what your body wants first. And John Paul II, speaking on behalf of the church, speaking on behalf of Christ, tells us that no, it's about self-gift. And I think the climax of the life of every Christian is receiving Jesus, and receiving Jesus for Catholics, right, in the Eucharist. And so the importance of reflecting on like literally the words that make Jesus, who is life, who is love, when he comes present in our midst, are those words, "This is my body, which is given up for you." And so to the extent that Christians live those words, whether that's as a priest, as a layman, as a laywoman, as a religious sister, to the extent that we live those words, we live our lives in conformity with the person and the love of Christ. And then to the extent that we don't live those words, "This is my body, it's about me, I serve myself," whatever have you, that actually divorces us from living the Eucharistic mystery that we're invited to say yes to. And so to just hold that up, that like literally like this is the climax of our lives, is "This is my body given for you." Either we live that or we don't.
I love that so much.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
That is so good.
Thank you so much, Valerie. Great to hear from you.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. We've got Kathy up next. Let her in here. Hey, Kathy, how are you?
Hey, very good. My question is, and it's a comment question, is when we were talking earlier, someone had asked about the breastfeeding and the young woman saying, well, it's my body, or I don't feel comfortable with it, or I dread it, is that I just wonder, and I put this out, if that isn't also a possible result of abuse, because that is real. That happens in families, it happens in neighborhoods. And I just wondered if you could touch, and whether it be father, sister, or whoever feels called to, is how abuse derails sometimes these beautiful thoughts in the Humanae Vitae, especially in this area of unitive and procreative. Thank you.
Great question, Kathy.
I don't know who wants it, but I can attest that yes, it absolutely is true. You know, there's been a lot of books have been written on survivors of abuse giving birth and breastfeeding, and just how their identity as women can be really broken, you know, as young girls, and that and stolen from them in many ways, and that things that were meant to be good and beautiful have been turned into something that is just, it feels dirty, it feels bad, it feels something that you want to avoid. And so you're absolutely right. A woman saying she doesn't want to breastfeed doesn't automatically mean that she's, you know, eschewing her maternal obligation to her child. It's not that. Sometimes it is, but I think that's a very good point, that awareness. And so I have worked with women that have had a lot of physical reactions to breastfeeding with anxiety and fear. It's just so important for us to just continually remind them of who they were meant to be. They are a beloved daughter of God, daughter of Christ, and that he's given his life for them. And even though someone else has devalued them and allowed that to be broken, that's not the end of the story. Like, that redemption is available. That's my piece on it.
I think too, I think we're not aware of how prevalent abuse is, not even just looking at the stereotypical abuse, but how our women are constantly barraged and abused, from media to images in movies to billboards. I mean, it's constantly like, you are an object, you are the sum of your body parts. You know, like, this is the ideal person, you don't fit this. And that emotional, mental abuse is as lasting in ramifications, and maybe even more confusing than physical, because we aren't even aware of it. It's become our water that we're drinking. And so I think you bring up a great point, Kathy, that even for the women who might not have the background that you would be able to say, oh yes, this happened at this point in time in her life, that still doesn't mean that she hasn't been being abused. And for us to be aware of that, that like the understanding of our body parts, what's most attractive and most used by the culture, is what's life-giving. And so to really enter into that mystery of, okay, they're trying to own this life-giving mystery and this like magnanimous mystery of womanhood. That makes sense. Like, I can understand how this objectification happened, but maybe sometimes as practitioners, if there are persons here who, college ministers who would engage these women, to really listen to maybe that adamant I, and take a back step and say like, okay, like, do you know how beautiful you are? As Leah was saying, and to really drive home the love of the Lord and the mystery and the beauty of the woman's body, that it's not something to be objectified. But I think you're right, Kathy. I think we need to be aware that objectification is happening all the time, and so many insidious ways, that there's going to be abuse, like trauma responses that go beyond even what would be the stereotypical flag markers for us to be able to pick that out.
Every person has the right to know that they are loved and that they're worthy of love. And when individuals don't experience that, I mean, that in and of itself is a form of abuse, because it's not acknowledging and reverencing the truth of who the human person is. So I think in a very simple way, every Christian is called, in their relationships with every other person, regardless of whether or not we agree with them or not, to treat them with that dignity and to treat them with that understanding that you are loved and you are worthy of love. Mm-hmm. And we do that primarily not through telling them, but through showing them, in our willingness to be with them, not against them. We mentioned compassion earlier. Literally, that means to suffer with, to be willing to enter into the sufferings of our brothers and sisters. I have seen tremendous healing and freedom, even in the hearts of young people who experience this, just when they are able to come to that understanding that I am lovable. And again, I think that's something that we have to speak of, but more importantly than speaking of it, we show that. Mm-hmm. By our willingness to not fear wounds, but our willingness to enter into them, to accompany others in the midst of their suffering and brokenness, and also to own our own. All of us, we the church today, we are the walking wounded. And that's great news, because Jesus came to save the wounded, right? He came to save those in need of a savior. And so the importance of also acknowledging our own stuff, that sure, maybe we don't suffer as much as other people do, but we do have suffering, we do have need of a healer.
And those wounds won't go away. If anyone's on here, like in being in need of a healer, that doesn't mean that then they're going to go away. Jesus resurrected with the scars. They're going to be a glorification for his redemption. And they're trophies, of what you've been through and of his love. And so to let the light shine through those, rather than to feel like you have to hide and be ashamed, because that's not your shame. And so I don't know if there's anyone out there, but just to say that, or for you to pass that message on to anyone you might encounter, that just because those wounds remain there doesn't mean that he hasn't healed them. It's just a sign of the resurrection. So,
yeah. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay with where you were, or have to claim that as your only identity. I mean, both Sister and Deacon and Leah talked about your identity as a child of God. And I think that's kind of the first thing we get wrong, is we try to focus on, okay, well, who are you? And, let's put you in a box in the objectification, and you are your job, or you are your, any number of other things. You identify as this, that, or the other, rather than focusing on the soul core of like, no, you're a human created in the image and likeness of God, made to love and to be loved. And that is that. Yeah. We've got just a few minutes left. Kathy, did that answer your question?
It absolutely did. And I just want that term of the wounds not going away. I do healing. I do a ministry to help those who've been injured. And we say that the wounds is a way that Christ's light can shine through. So not to be ashamed of them. And I loved what you said, Kate, and as well as the deacon, regarding the fact that shouldn't define who you are. And that shouldn't be an excuse not to try to hit that image of what God had intended. So I love it. It was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. All right, we have, it looks like time for one more question here. Jeannie, I'm gonna let you in real quick here. Let's see.
Okay, hello, how are you?
Good.
Thank you. Yes, I thought I appreciated the honesty about the culture and the statement that the culture is wounded and confused, but so is the church. I really appreciate that. And then I also wanted to know if, regarding the hookup culture, you said you were talking about the study, if you would be able to send out a reference for that.
Yeah, I can send it. So I'll make sure to include it in our resources page. So there's two, Donna Freitas is the one who did a lot of the work. And then there's a woman out of Boston College whose name I'll remember later, but she followed up, the two kind of knew of each other, and did something called the Dating Project, which I think would be fascinating for anyone to read. She basically had to teach college kids how to date, and they all failed their first assignment.
Right. So I guess a follow-up question about the church being wounded, and I guess this is for the deacon. What do you see happening? What are some bright lights happening to deal with that?
Beautiful question. I was just speaking about this morning. Jesus is actively renewing his church. He is at work actively renewing and purifying his bride. I personally have seen that in the seminaries. I do not know a man who is currently in formation for the priesthood, who's personally speaking just at my own heart, who I would personally question the purity of his intentions or of his desires to serve as the church as a spiritual father. I think literally to a man, I think every person that I know that is actively discerning or pursuing a vocation to the priesthood is in it for the right reasons and has had to fight uphill in order to name and to acknowledge those desires to serve as spiritual fathers over God's people. And so I think even just something as simple as that, in order to choose to go to the seminary or to choose to like sister to embrace the religious life or what have you, there is a real martyrdom that takes place even just in the midst of that discernment and that willingness to give oneself over to the possibility of that vocation. And I think that is that's a sign that Jesus is alive and that he is still at work in his church. But two, I think it's a real sign of hope for us that there are a lot of young people that are willing to be led by Jesus more than themselves or the culture or anything else. That they are willing to put Jesus first and to live the truth that he is God. And that's the key to holiness and renewal for all of us. Is that before going back to the seminary, I taught the faith professionally in a Catholic high school for 4 years, and just incredible to see the openness and the willingness of the next generation of men and women leading our culture. They've been bruised, they've been beaten, they acknowledge their woundedness, but there are some amazing shining lights that I think are really going to make a significant impact for Jesus and for his church in this time, precisely because they have grown up in the midst of a culture that tells them all of these lies. And so really, I mean, if they are able to cling fast to the Lord through the midst of growing up in this time, in this place, they're going to be forces to be reckoned with as adults in the Christian life, because they do recognize that the path to happiness is not the one that the world proposes.
Thank you. That is just great news. It's great to hear. So
that being said, keep praying for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, we have reached the end of our time. I want to thank everyone for participating. Encourage everyone to say some extra prayers on the 25th for the 52nd anniversary of Humanae Vitae, and go out and celebrate life. So we will see you all here next week. Don't forget to invite a friend. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.